according to the what's food for a species, nuts and seeds do qualify as food. You just don't recommend eating them.
That's right. Nuts and seeds so far meet the requirements, right? I believe that nuts may have played an important role for humans in various stages of our history in times of floods and fires and droughts, situations where maybe there was no fruit available, because the nut, intact in the shell, has a long shelf life, as long as the shell is intact. If the shell is cracked or broken, what happens?
Starts to oxidize.
It begins to oxidize and the fat becomes rancid. Okay, it's no longer safe to eat. But as long as that shell is intact, it'll last a long time. So there may be times when there was nothing else to eat. Then, thank God, we've got these things protected from the environment in their shell. And because they're so concentrated, right? I mean, macadamias are like 60% fat, 65% fat, and the rest is mostly protein. Because they're so concentrated, do we need to eat a lot of them? No. So there are times where there's nothing else. Yeah, nuts and seeds are fine. Just remember, when we have other food, which is far easier for the body to digest, far better meets the body's nutrient profile needs, we're far better off eating that. And if you want to continue eating nuts, you should probably buy them in their shells and open them one at a time with a couple rocks, because that will naturally limit how much of this high fat, high protein stuff you consume. Otherwise, it's easy to overdo it, right? Today, you go to the market, you pull the lever, and in 10 seconds, your bag has 2 kilos of nuts in it. Okay? Back when I first went raw 28 years ago, and I still had cravings for stuff, I would go to my organic market, I'd buy a pound of cashews, raw cashews, which aren't raw, but I didn't know that at the time. When they say raw cashews, what they mean is not roasted, and I'll come back to this. I didn't know that. I thought they were raw. I'd buy a pound of raw cashews, I'd buy a pound of raw medjool dates, and I'd sit in my car and eat this combination, like all of it. Okay? This is why I gave up marijuana. I didn't need it anymore. I was getting stoned eating medjools and cashews. Okay, who needed pot? All right, it's a terrible combination for the body. High fat, high sugar. It's difficult for the body to deal with. But at the time, as I was just starting my transition, it was okay. Now, shortly after that, a year later, I couldn't tolerate that anymore. It was way too much for me. Okay? So we talked earlier about how many of you, when you transitioned, you were attracted to high quantities of nuts or seeds. But that, at some point, probably lost its appeal. And if it didn't, you should leave it anyway. Now, of course, now it's completely different, because you've now transitioned your body by fasting. If you haven't already, you're in the process of doing so. And so your body is going to be much more efficient and will absolutely not tolerate high quantities of fat or protein. Okay?
During that transition time, like I saw you in the video there, it's like that like maybe it is recommendable to eat a little bit more fat when your body's still not totally efficient to get all your essential fatty acids. But what do you think about the idea of going super low fat right from the beginning and letting yourself maybe run a little low on those fatty acids, but forcing your body to adapt more quickly to being more efficient and getting those from fruits, etc.?
Personally, I think it always makes the most sense to listen to the body rather than trying to override it. So if your body is calling for high fat, it probably needs it. Okay? I don't think we need to withhold what the body needs. What we do, it'll become more efficient anyway over time, because we're eating better food, the body's having a chance to cleanse and heal. I don't think we have to try to force that. And in the meantime, put ourselves potentially in harm's way by creating a deficiency of some kind. Okay, by not giving the body what it needs. I don't think there's any reason to do that. It's another strategy. It's a strategy a lot of people recommend. Don't eat nuts and seeds. At the beginning, I would say to somebody who's not fasting, not you guys, not after fasting, But someone who hasn't fasted, yeah, it's okay to eat a little more fat. It's perfectly fine. Your body probably needs that. It needs it because it's not efficient enough to get what it needs from normal quantities. Okay? So coming back to your question, yes, nuts and seeds are food, some seeds. Nuts, certainly, they're food for us, but not necessarily something we should be consuming much of, right? Because it's highly concentrated fat and protein. It's easy to overwhelm the body. In fact, it's a funny story you might enjoy. Avocados, are also concentrated fat. Now, the difference between avocados and nuts is that avocados are fruits. And so what happens is fruit ripens. Think about a banana, okay? A green banana not only isn't food, it could be a weapon. You could kill somebody with a green banana. It's hard enough that, right? Because as the banana ripens, what's happening is enzymes in the banana are breaking down the starch into sugar, creating water in the meantime. So it goes from being dry and hard to being soft and much more wet. They're breaking down the proteins into the amino acid components that make them up. They're breaking down the fat, and there is fat in everything, every living cell. So they're breaking that small amount of fat down into the fatty acids. When you eat it, you've got something that's much more digestible. Your body doesn't have to work if it's ripe, right? If you try to eat a green banana, you're going to have a tummy ache. Okay, in fact, green peppers. How many of you have noticed that when you eat green peppers, maybe you burp or you get gassy, you have a little indigestion? This happens to a lot of people. Why?
They're not ripe.
It's not ripe. It's not ripe. Okay? Green peppers will become red, yellow, orange, purple, some other color. They're not ripe. This is why they're cheaper. It's a lot easier to get an unripe fruit to market. Why? Well, you're not going to be happy about this, but insects are smarter than people. Okay? They won't eat the green fruit. They won't eat the unripe fruit most of the time. People will. People eat green peppers. Most insects will leave them alone. So it's much easier for the grower to harvest them. And it's much more profitable. Because, remember, the plant makes the fruit. Why?
So that I could spread seeds.
Fruits are seed delivery devices. It's a method of delivering seeds away from the plant so that they can propagate. The seeds are viable when the fruit is ripe. If the farmer picks all the peppers when they're green, the plant thinks it's failed to do its job. And so it makes more peppers. Okay, it keeps producing them as long as they're picked green. So they can keep harvesting them. Okay? So they have less rot. Things aren't going to rot if they're not ripe. I mean, sit long enough they will, but it's much easier to get those green peppers to market. They're much less likely to be attacked by pests. The plant keeps producing more. How many of you have noticed, which is sweeter, the red pepper or the green pepper?
Red pepper.
Red pepper is kind of sweet. The green pepper is not sweet at all. Why is that?
It's ripe.
The starch hasn't been converted to sugar yet. Okay? Don't eat unripe fruit. Don't do it. You can't digest it. It's not helping you. Okay? Don't eat green peppers. Don't eat anything that's unripe. Okay?
You're talking about the difference between nuts and avocado.
So the avocado is what?
Fruit.
A fruit. So as the avocado ripens, what's happening?
Enzymes are breaking it down.
The enzymes are breaking down that high fat content into the fatty acids. Your body has much less work to do eating a ripe avocado than eating a bunch of nuts, the same number of calories of nuts. So I eat avocados, but I don't eat nuts and seeds. Very, very rarely will I eat nuts or seeds. Avocados, every time I have a salad, for sure. No problem, as long as you don't overdo it. Now, can you overdo it? Absolutely. Several years ago, I got an email from a guy from Scotland. I used to write for an English magazine. It was a quarterly. I wrote for several years. So he wrote to me and he said, Loren, he said, I've read all your magazine articles. I own the Creating Perfect Health System. We have a program, we still offer, It's like 16 hours of live lectures and seminars. There's written material. The recorded lectures are on video and audio, some audio, some video. He had this whole package. He'd been through it numerous times. He'd read all my articles. And he said, I'm doing what you teach, but it's not working for me. Can we schedule a consultation? So we set up a call, and I get him on the phone. I said, okay, so let's talk about what you're eating. I said, what do you have for breakfast? And he said, I don't eat breakfast. I'm not hungry in the morning. I said, okay, that's fine. I don't eat breakfast either. I can't argue with that. I said, what do you have for lunch? He said, well, normally my first meal of the day is going to be 6 or 8 oranges, apples, peaches, plums, nectarines, some melon, a bunch of grapes, whatever it is. Sounds like a reasonable quantity. So, okay, that's fine. And how about dinner? He said, my dinner is a salad every night. I said, okay. And then I thought, salad, that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So I said, so tell me more about the salad. What's your salad? He said, well, it's an avocado salad. I said, oh, what's an avocado salad? He said, well, I'll take 7 or 8 Hass avocados. I said, okay, stop there. I think we found the problem, okay? You're getting, 75, 80% of your calories from fat every day. That's not a good idea. That's not going to work. He changed that and was perfectly fine. Okay? So yes, avocados can be overeaten, but much easier in reasonable quantity, much easier for the body than nuts or seeds. Okay? Nuts or seeds, again, maybe good to have on hand if all hell breaks loose, keep them in the shell. Now, if they're shelled, if they're out of the shell already, they need to be kept in the freezer, ideally. In the freezer to maintain them as long as possible, nuts and seeds. Again, at room temperature, they go rancid. And so if you're buying them, and if you go to a market that doesn't have a lot of traffic, and you get them from something they're sitting at room temperature out of their shell, chances are good they're rancid. And most people cannot taste that. Okay? Be careful. Yeah.
So would be having like a whole avocado every night with your salad be too much fat?
It's not too much for most people. It's perfectly fine. You might even get to the point where you can handle more than one, depending on their size. But in time. So your last meal here can be a green salad, and it will have some avocado. It'll be about a quarter of a medium avocado. That's it, maximum. Okay, because we want you to start slowly and work up to eating more of it. Yeah, Sean?
Is it okay to store nuts in an airtight container like a mason jar?
It's a great idea to store nuts in an airtight container. Absolutely. It can only extend the lifespan, for sure. But they should still be kept cold. Yeah.
If we can't do it by tasting it, how would one identify when a nut has gone rancid?
It's difficult to do. That's why I'm telling you. Don't buy them at room temperature out of their shell. If it's a place that has really high turnover, maybe they're okay. Not likely. Most of the time, they're probably really not very good. Okay, let's come back to cashews. What's going on with cashews? Why are raw cashews not raw? Cashews, it turns out, first of all, anyone familiar with a cashew tree?
No.
Yeah? Did you know that the cashew tree makes a fruit? It's called a cashew apple. That's what we call it in English anyway. It's not an apple. There are a lot of things called apple, by the way. We use the term apple to describe a lot of fruits. So here we have cashew apples and water apples and rose apples and,
Pineapples.
I'm sorry?
Pineapples.
Pineapples, and some other ones as well. The cashew apple, so the seed is interesting, right? The nut is actually the seed of this fruit, but it's unusual because it doesn't grow inside the fruit. The cashew forms first on the end of the branch in a cashew-shaped pod, a hard shell. And then above that grows the apple afterward. Okay? But remember, nut trees make nuts instead of making fruit, with the understanding that by saving all the energy by not having to make fruit, they can afford to have some of their seeds eaten. And the strategy of making the seeds edible means that animals come along and do their work for them by burying the seeds. But the cashew is not a nut. It's not really a nut. There's a fruit. It's putting all the energy into making fruit. So what does the cashew tree really want to do? Make sure the seed gets in the ground, not in your belly, in the ground. Okay? How does it protect it? Well, it protects it by covering it with a substance called urushiol. Everyone's familiar with the fact that the almond has a little brown papery skin on it, right, inside the shell. Cashew has something similar, but on a cashew, that papery skin is covered with urushiol. You know urushiol?
Poison ivy?
Poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac, all contain urushiol. When you touch the leaf, it makes your skin blister. Urushiol.
Doesn't mango sometimes contain some?
Not sometimes. The mango skin also contains urushiol. It's the same family. People who pick mangoes for export have to wear protective clothing. They wear gloves and masks and full suits so they don't touch the mangoes to their skin. When a mango's ripe, there's no urushiol. Again, the plant is intelligently trying to protect the fruit from being eaten until it's actually ripe. Okay? So, in fact, I was in London 18 years ago, I think. I was doing a seminar there. And someone on the production team for the organization that brought me there said, we had a morning break, and then we had another break an hour and a half, 2 hours later for lunch. At the morning break, she said to me, I'm going to the organic market. Can I get you something for lunch? I said, what do they have now? She said, well, they've got this, mangoes, So I said, okay, get me 4 mangoes. So she comes back with 4 big mangoes, and at the break, I eat these mangoes. And what I would do is I would take the skin, I'd use a knife and cut it, and I'd take the skin and I'd draw it over my bottom teeth, right? So I'm using my teeth to scrape the flesh off the inside of the skin. Anyone ever do it this way?
Yeah, I did that.
My top lip was the one that was constantly in contact with the skin over and over again. That night, my top lip blew up like a balloon. It swelled to like 3 times its normal size, just this lip. That was the urushiol. And bless you, fortunately there probably wasn't very much of it because it was actually fine the next day. But it blew up and then was okay. And again, it may well be that it was okay the next day because I'd already fasted 3 dozen times and had been eating a close to perfect diet for 5 or 7 years, 8 years. So my body was able to out-process this stuff as quickly as possible. Okay, so you can't just open the shell and peel, eat the nut. You could do that, but it might kill you. You get urushiol inside your intestines, you're in bad shape. There was a guy once who said, I can eat poison ivy. And he was right. But it was the last thing he ate. Okay? You probably don't want to eat this without getting rid of this paper skin. And because you can't handle it, they're plunged in boiling water to take the skin off. And that's how they get rid of it. So when you see raw cashews, they have usually been heat treated. They're not really raw. Okay, just be aware of that. I don't know if anyone's still doing this. There's a famous raw vegan, I won't mention any names, but I'll tell you his name rhymes with Mavid Mulf. Okay, I'm not going to tell you who it is though. And he used to sell raw cashews, really raw cashews. We bought them on several occasions and tried sprouting them. If it's a raw seed, what should happen? It should sprout. They rotted every time. They never germinated. Okay, they weren't raw. They weren't raw. All right, so it's good to know about cashews. And if you find a cashew tree and think, I want to open this up and eat the cashew, don't try that. Okay, don't try it. Don't touch it.
What about the apple then, of the cashew nut?
You can eat the apple. It's a fruit. I don't particularly like it. The cashew apple is very astringent. So apples have some astringency as well. But if you want to really know, like the definition of astringency, have you ever eaten an unripe persimmon, tried to eat an unripe persimmon?
Yeah.
What happened?
it makes your mouth kind of like dry and fuzzy. And,
It's almost like you want to turn your mouth inside out. It's a weird kind of a thing. That's astringency. It's drying. Astringency means it's something that's like alcohol is an astringent. You put it on your skin and it will dry. It dries the skin. So fruits that are astringent dry your mouth out. And cashew apples have significant amount of astringency. I don't know too many people that actually like to eat them. In Panama, here I don't really know that many people that use them so much. But in Panama, a lot of the locals, the natives in Panama, will use them to make drinks, alcoholic drinks usually. They'll blend the fruit with sugar and alcohol in a blender. And that's how they get consumed primarily. Yeah.
But to be a fruit for species, that technically the cashew doesn't fit all these.
No, it doesn't.
So it shouldn't be on the list.
It's not on the list. It's not food for the body. It's not a nut.
I heard the exact same thing about almonds, that most of them on the market are cooked, even though they say raw.
In the U.S., no. Well, they shouldn't say raw if they're cooked. In the U.S., so just a few years ago, there was a law passed in the U.S., and I'm not sure what they do in Canada. I mean, Canada's the 51st state, so it's probably the same. In Canada, I'm not sure what they're doing, but they passed a law in the U.S. that almonds had to be pasteurized because someone got into trouble. Someone died from eating almonds that were, I don't know what happened. They had some sort of issue. You can still get raw, unpasteurized almonds. There's ways to sell them, but I think like if they're packaged in a sealed package on the shelf of a store, they have to be pasteurized. So there'll be in other places you can still get almonds raw. But in the U.S. and maybe North America, most of what you're going to see is going to be cooked, pasteurized. Yeah. And almonds, in fact, are interesting because almonds, too, the almond tree really wants to create more trees and doesn't so much want the nut to be eaten. But again, it's this compromise. We'll make something that's tasty, provides lots of calories, animals will eat it. Most almonds are still toxic, at least slightly toxic. The almonds that we eat have been bred for very low toxicity, but wild almonds, still quite toxic.
You've got cyanide in them, haven't they? Is it cyanide?
I think it is cyanide, yeah.
But it's not just on the brown shell?
No.
The skin?
No, I don't.
Inside?
I think so, yeah. The brown skin is mostly tannic acid. So if you've never tried this, I mean, first of all, if you're going to eat nuts, not something I'd recommend doing very often, they should be soaked first for about 12 hours, okay, in water.
How much water to nut ratio?
It doesn't make any difference as long as the nuts are completely covered. I mean, almonds will double in size. So if you put a bunch of almonds in a big bowl and you cover it with water and you think that's enough, the next morning it won't be enough. Half the almonds will be dry because they're going to dramatically grow and now they're not going to be wet. So you need to put like twice as much water to make sure that they actually stay wet. You soak them for 12 hours, you drain it, you rinse it. Now again, some of you weren't here when we talked about this last, but what you're doing is you're removing enzyme inhibitors that prevent those almonds from germinating, which means when they're enzymatically inactive, your body has a lot of work to do, even if they're raw. So they should be, you're going to eat them raw, they still need to be soaked first. If you're going to buy nut butters, which I wouldn't recommend doing, okay, very concentrated fat. First of all, peanut butter is anything but healthy. You can make your own almond butter, you can buy it, but if you're going to buy it, there's only one company that I can think of, that I'm aware of, in North America anyway, called Rejuvenative Foods. And they're actually in some places, like in Florida, there's a local guy in Florida that makes nut butters and sells them in the refrigerator case at Whole Foods. But if Rejuvenative Foods is even still in business, I have no idea. When I was living in the US 15 years ago, we would sometimes buy their stuff. They're super expensive. Like a small jar of almond butter might be $20 or $25, okay? But they're the only ones where they soaked the almonds before they made butter from them. The rest of them are raw. Like you can buy raw almond butter, but they're unsoaked. Very difficult to digest.
And they're with the skin when you buy the butter?
Honestly, I don't know how they process it. Everything is cream, so you wouldn't see it. I'm
Inside.
guessing they probably take them off. But if you haven't tried this, if you soak a bunch of almonds, if you've only ever eaten almonds with the skin, if you soak them and then you use your thumbnail to scratch that papery skin off, it tastes a lot like coconut. It's much tastier without the tannic acids in the skin. It's much sweeter and tastier. I actually would use that when I was doing recipes. If I'm using almonds in a dessert, I would take the skin off for sure. If I'm using the almonds in a savory dish, and again, I don't do this for myself, I do this for other people. My mother and my sister will come visit, as they do every year. Okay, they eat normally. So when they're here, I'll prepare some food, raw vegan, but I'll prepare some stuff for them. Dinners will be sometimes a more prepared meal. If it's a savory thing, I might leave the skin on because it won't be as sweet that way. Just depends on what you're doing. Hi, enjoying my videos? If you'd like to learn much more, check out the Academy for Vibrant Living, where our Vibrant Health course will teach you everything you need to know to take your health to an amazing new level. And if you'd like to turn your passion for health into a lucrative career, check out the Health Coaching course, where you can become a professional certified health coach and help as many people as possible see amazing results.